Hey, how are you doing? I hope you enjoyed the server actions video that we published last time. The Next.js playlist is just growing and we crossed 20 plus videos. Today, we are going to get a deep dive on error handling with Next.js application. If you see at a surface level, handling error with Next.js application is quite easier. They say in the documentation very clearly that you have to drop something called an error.js file into relevant folder of your application and the error handling should be done very smoothly. But there is more to it. There are certain edge cases and there are certain patterns that we need to keep in mind while going for handling error in Next.js application. So in this video, we will first understand a few key concepts around error handling. For example, what error boundary is and how it is applicable for a Next.js application. And then we will build an application where we will be producing error in multiple routes of it, and we will see how we handle those error. We'll also see if error occurs in layout, how do we handle that. So there are lots to learn. Let's get started. And if you like this video, don't forget to post a like. And if you have additional questions or if you have any words of encouragement for me, there is a comment section. Please post your comment. Let's get started. To get started with the understanding of Next.js error handling, the key concept behind is something called error boundary. And the concept of error boundary is coming from React itself. I have a video where I have covered suspense and error boundary in depth. If you would like to go through it, the video link is in the description of this video. Please catch up. Alright, so what is error boundary and how does it matter for error handling in Next.js? Consider this diagram that you see on your screen is an application which is having multiple components in its layout. So something like this is the home page, for example. On that there is a header, on app bar there is a sidebar, and there's an area where you have the content. Inside that there are multiple components bringing multiple details for the content. If any of this component produces error, React is not going to render that component at all. So it means React is definitely going to throw an error, but at the same time, React is going to take that component out of his render tree, thus out of the virtual DOM and all those factors through which you get to see the components alive on your page. But that will be really counter user experience for your users, right? The best UX is where you tell user that something wrong happened and why certain thing wrong happened so that user can take appropriate actions. Error handling is one of the way to satisfy that user experience for the end users. So React gives us something called error boundary, through which you can tell React that what is the fallback that you are arranging in case there is an error in a component. So if the error happens, then you can allow that particular component to get into a fallback. The fallback could be another component where you can clearly say what is the reason for this error and what user can do next. Now, all this error that we are talking about is the runtime error. For the compilation error, you will get it as you write the code because that's the infrastructure we generally use. But for runtime errors, which is thrown by a part of the code in form of exception, or there is a null happen, or there are certain things which is causing this runtime error, you have this arrangement with you where a error boundary can really give you a much elegant result than a blank page or a blank component without saying what would have happened. In React, this is how you define an error boundary. For example, consider that you have a products component, and when the products components produce a runtime error, you can safeguard it with an error boundary saying that instead of just taking out the products component out of the tree and making it really looking ugly, let's fall back to something like a message which says something went wrong. In this case, we have used this p tag. You can also use another React component where you can use a lot of styling, lot of reasons and everything together. Now, as you understand error boundary, let's see how this error boundary come into picture for a Next.js application. Now the diagram that you see on your screen, it depicts a very normal Next.js application. What do we have? We have an app folder over here. Inside app, we have a layout and a page.js file. Very normal thing. Forget this error.js for a moment. Inside this app folder, along with layout and page, you also have a folder called users. Inside users, again, you have another layout and a page. Again, forget that error.js for a moment. So this is how you will be creating the routes, right? In Next.js application, this app will give you the slash or the top route, and then users is going to give you a static route, which is like slash users. We have learned this enough from this playlist already. Now let's introduce this error.js file. Once we introduce this error.js file in our Next.js application, it says that through error.js file, we are going to create one error boundary. The error boundary, what we have seen just now for a normal React application. We say Next.js is going to create error boundary around the page that is in the same location or the co-located to this particular error.js file. So it means if there is a page.js file which is co-located, means the same folder to this error.js file, this error.js file is going to create an error boundary around this particular page.js file and any component that you would have used inside this page.js file. So page.js file may have other A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H component. They may have other P, Q, R, S, T component. All those components along with the page will be embedded inside this error boundary. Similarly, when it comes to this particular user route, for user route also it will be the same thing. The page will be embedded inside the error boundary. Now, if I see this in a hierarchical fashion, as you see, there is a layout and there is a error boundary with the fallback, say, error component, and inside that you have this page over here. Now inside that page you have another sub page, which means the nested route. For the nested route, again it has a layout, so you have this layout, and inside the layout you have the error boundary and you have the page. Now if I do it like this, for this error.js we are getting this particular error boundary over here. You get to see this? I am marking it with green color. Now inside this there is one more error.js file, this one. For this one we have got one more error boundary over here. Okay, so this is how for the Next.js application. Now the benefit of this one, let's say there is an error happened in page or any other components that is inside this page. What will happen? That error will be tracked and taken care by this error boundary over here. Okay, so I can actually annotate this like this page is the slash users page and this page is the slash page, the root. So whenever there is an error happening in this page or any of its component, this is taken care by this error boundary, and this error is a component that we have created inside this error.js file. This is going to render instead of the page itself or instead of the overlay that Next.js usually shows, which is not that great, but in this case you have an opportunity to create your own component with your own style and everything inside this error.js file. But what if this error.js file is not there? In case this error.js file is not there, this error boundary that we have created over here will not be placed at all. Then what will happen if there is an error happen inside the page or any component underneath? In that case, Next.js will look for, okay, I don't have any error boundary around this page, but does it have a layout? Okay, it has a layout. So for this layout surrounded this, do I have any kind of error boundary? Yes, I have another error boundary. So it means now if there is an error happen inside this page and if there is no error boundary surrounded to it, this will be propagated upper or the propagated higher, and it will be managed by this particular error boundary, and so on. That's how it will kind of move up. So here we have seen things in two levels. One is in the app itself, this error.js file. Another is in the users, this particular error.js file. Let's go to one level down. What if under users there is a dynamic route? Like I can get into a page based on a user's ID. What if I have to handle an error over there? How do I define or draw this error boundary conditions like this or the hierarchy like this so that I can understand things very, very clearly? And this is one thing that I want to call out for you if you are still watching this video, is like when you understand some of these things internally, you know what exactly happening with your code when you are writing the code. So don't skip this thinking that it is just the syntax I'm going to copy paste and things are going to work on if I take it from ChatGPT, Stack Overflow or my friend's code. You got to understand this, because when something is not working, this understanding alone is going to save you from those situations. Okay, I'm talking from my own experience. Please take that seriously. Now we have made this example a little bit more complex for you to understand, but I'm sure that it will be much easier to understand now as you understood the previous example. So here we have app, which is the topmost route, which is slash. Inside that we have a layout.js, page.js, and an error.js like last time. Then again we have users. Inside users we have a layout.js, page.js, error.js, just like last time. Using this users, now I am creating another dynamic route called this ID. That means user slash any dynamic ID like 1, 2, 3, 4, ABCD, whatever it is. Inside that again I have layout.js, page.js, and error.js. Now, how can you think about this right side diagram, right side error boundary hierarchy? This is what I was talking about to put some focus on. So, in this case, the topmost layout will be pointing to the app. Inside that, I have error.js. So, there will be an error boundary created and that will wrap this particular page.js file. In case there is an error happen inside this page.js file, the fallback will be this error.js file. Inside that, I have a component which is called error. Now inside this there is something called users, another route. In that also there is a layout. So I have this layout over here, and then there is a error boundary because I have error.js here. I have also color coded it. So this error.js is in green. You can see it is in green here as well. Inside that there is a page. So this particular error boundary is again enclosing the page here. So this page is nothing but this particular page, users page. Inside that there is another layout now, which is like the slash ID. So this is what it is over here, the ID. Inside that there is another error.js file. So you have another error boundary over here. Now, if there is an error happen inside this particular page, like this page under this ID, so it will be caught by this error boundary. If this error boundary is not present, that means in this particular route, you don't have this error.js file, that's fine. Then the error will be tackled by this particular error boundary because it will go propagated higher. If this error boundary also not present, that means in the users level also you don't have any error.js file, it will again propagated higher and it will come to this error boundary, which is the top most level error boundary over here. Even if it is not there, then you don't have any opportunity to show your custom error page. In that case, Next.js is going to show its error overlay that you see come up as a pop-up with all the stack trace. That's what your user is going to see. But that's not a great UX, so it's always advisable that you put your own error message. I hope that this hierarchy is completely clear to you, because I'm going to get into code now, and this is the exact thing I'm going to code, and this is the exact thing I'm going to show you, like how each of this hierarchy working. Before we go there, one small thing. In case the layout is not present in each of these things, because you may not have layout in each of these routing, right, or under each of this folder, that's fine. You just take out this layout thing in that case. So that means there is a page, and underneath that page you have a error boundary. Inside that you have the page which is underneath this particular route. So in this case, under users you have this page, and this page is this one, and under users when you have ID, for this page you have this page directly. You may not have layout over here. That's perfectly fine. So I hope this is completely understood to you. If not, spend some time understanding this mapping, the one that I showed with 2-3 examples. Now let's get into coding, where we'll be creating the same layout, trying to create some error conditions within each of these navigations. I have an Next.js application here, and after creating the application using the usual command that we have on the Next.js documentation, I have made a few changes, very straightforward changes that I'm going to show you very quickly. First thing I have done is in the global.css file, I have removed everything, almost everything apart from this import of base components and utilities, and given a simple style to body for the background color black and the foreground color white for the text color white, so that it's visible well and it doesn't heat your eyes too much. And then in the layout.js file, I've just changed this particular create next app, the default title, to this title, handling errors home. And in the page.js file, whatever was there, I just removed everything and just created a simple div which says error handling. That's it. These are the 3 things I have done, and I'm running it locally with my local server. And this is how it is coming. The text error handling I've given into the page.js file. That is what is getting rendered on my browser. So let's go to the application now and try to understand the things one by one. So I have a app folder. Inside that I have a layout.js and I have a page.js file. Excellent. And inside app, now I'm going to create 2 new routes. One I will call as courses, and another one I'll say as users. Okay. Now courses, under courses, I'm going to create a page.js file, very simple page.js file with a very simple React component called course list page, which is having a div and a simple h1 that says course list page. Nothing more than that. Very simple course route. So if I go and do /courses, I should see course list page coming up over here. Now for users, similarly, I am going to create one more page.js file. Again, it is a very simple component. You have seen a component like this a lot in this playlist. It has a div. Inside the div, I have a h1 which says user list page and a link with the href called /user/123 and a text called Alexander. So that means if I go to this page, I will be able to see Alexander with the underline. And once we click on Alexander, is going to go to a page called /user/123. You might have guessed that what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a dynamic route very soon, but let's first test this page. So instead of courses, once I go to users, I can see user list page. And if I click on Alexander now, it won't go to the page because I have not created it. That's what I'm going to do now. So inside users, now let's create another folder and give ID as the name because that's how I want to create the dynamic route. And over here again, let's create a new file called page.js, which is again a very simple component called user details page, which will get this particular parameters ID because we are doing the dynamic routing. And then we are saying that this is a user details page. And if we get a user details, which we don't have yet, then we will print the user details name and user details email. Simple, isn't it? Now, how do we get this user details? That's the next question. And we are cooking up all this story so that we can actually do a better error management scenario. Nothing more than that, right? So for getting this user details, let's mimic something or let's mock something. To mock it now, I am going to create a new folder over here, which is called lib. Inside this lib folder, I'm going to create a new file called user.js. And I'm going to mark this file called server only so that it runs only on the server. And then I'm going to create a new function called get user details that takes an ID. I'm exporting this function and returning a hard-coded user details. That's it, because we have not connected to DB. That's not the intention that we are having over here. We want to focus on error handling, right? So it means if I take this get user details now and go to this ID page, I can import get user details over here. I can do like const user details equals to get user details and let's pass the ID. This ID I'm getting from here, right? Now, whatever the ID you pass, irrespective of that, is going to print you the same details always because we have hard coded it. But this far, the thing should work. So let's go to the UI once. We'll refresh, click on Alexander, and we can see like it goes to /user/123, and I see Alexander's name and Alexander's email coming over here. So our routes are working pretty well. The one more thing that we can do over here, instead of error handling at the topmost route, instead of that particular text, I can go to that page.js file and I have included now two links over here. One link goes to /courses, another link goes to /users. Okay, so if I see my app now, in total I have a /courses/users. If I go to /courses, it says course list page. And if I go to /users, it says user list page. If I click on a user, it gives me user details page. To get started with handling error and to create the error boundaries, we have to create a special file called error.js file in the route where you want to handle that error. So let us start with the topmost route, which is app, like /. So over here, let's create a new file called error.js. Now, what will be the content of this error.js file? For that, let us go to the documentation once. So if you come to error handling, this particular page, this gives a sample error.js file content that what it should be. But there are few things that you need to keep in mind. For example, this component must be a client component. So you have to use this use client directive. And then once you use this particular component, you get few things as a prop. Once you get us the error, inside that error, you will have the error message and the digest. The error message is something that you will be using more. And you also get a method called reset so that you can retry and see whether the error is gone or not. So I'm going to copy this particular component as it is from here, going to go to VS Code and paste it over here. We will be modifying this in a bit. So as you can see, there is a use effect. And if there is an error change, we are just logging this error for now. And there is a JSX, there is a div which says something went wrong. Here, actually, instead of something went wrong, we can render error.message so that actual message get rendered. And then there is a button. On click of the button, we are calling this reset function so that we retry. If in case the error has been resolved, we will get the page back. So this is how our error page look like. Now what I suggest over here is this JSX part is to take out and create as a separate component. Why? Because this error.js file, we might put it into different routes. Right now we have put it into app, we might put inside courses or users or inside this dynamic route wheresoever. Now copying the exactly same thing in each of this route is fine. But one thing might change. The thing which might change is this particular JSX in some way. For example, you might want to change the theme of it or some kind of coloring or some kind of JSX hierarchy. In that case, you have to come to each of the error.js file every time and do the modification under each of this route. Instead of that, we can refactor this a bit and then create our own component out of this so that if we have to make changes, we'll be making changes into one component, not into all the error.js file in case it is required. Now I'm going to create a new folder called components, and inside components I'm going to create a new file called error-display.jsx. The error-display.jsx file will have this particular JSX with some basic styling. That's what I'm going to do. This is how the component look like. Error display, text message, and that reset that particular function as props. Exactly same hierarchy only I'm keeping, not changing. If you want, you can change it, but just provide a few classes so that it looks little bit elegant, and I'm showing the message over here. Now in the error.js file, I'm going to import this error display and going to replace this div to div, this entire piece using this error display, passing a message, and then passing the reset. The reset is coming from here, and this message we will be taking out of this error. But how do we do it? For that, we need to manage the state a bit, because whenever the error is available or error changes, we have to make that changes appropriately as well. A normal React, right? So for that purpose, along with use effect, let's import use state as well. And then let's create a state over here called message set message, initialize it with null. And in case there is an error happen, what we can do, we can, before logging into the console, we can do set message error.message, and this is the message we have passed over here. So this is how the component is for us. Now only thing that we can do, as this error.js at the app level, we have created it at the app level, right? So we can maybe put an h1 over here so that we can identify it very clearly, that where exactly this error is propagating to. We are saying this is an app page error. So far so good. Now this error.js file should catch any error that happens in this page.js file, that happens inside the users page.js file, or this ids page.js file, or this courses page.js file, because we have not created any error.js file inside any of these routes. That means any error happen inside any of these pages, it will be propagated higher, come to the app level, and in the app level there will be an error.js file found, and this is what will be displayed. This particular component will be displayed for your error handling. Can you do this? Yes. So for this, now we have to simulate one runtime error, because this all error handling is for runtime error. How can we simulate a runtime error? We can simulate a runtime error from this users route. From the users route means going to users route, the users page, if I open, here I can do something so that I can throw an error, and after throwing that error, what I'll see, it will first try to find out under users is there is an error.js file, is not there, then go out, above users there is app, inside app is there is an error.js file, yes, so it's going to show me this component. Let us do this one first. Inside lib, create one more file, new file called auth.js. We are not going to do any kind of authentication over here, but rather we are going to simulate stuff, something like this. I have created a function called get session, and I'm returning a session information for a user. Now let's say this session information is not available for now. Okay, I am returning null. Now I can do a condition in my page.js file that if the session information is null, then throw an exception. If that exception is thrown, that means runtime that exception will be thrown. I am creating an error scenario. So let's do that. So for now, I'll put this, the success scenario. I'll go to page.js file, users page.js file, and coming here, let me import get session This is an async method, so this has to be async, and here I am doing const session equals to await of get session, and here this logic I can do. If no session, in that case throw an error with a message saying no session is available. For the debugging sake, let's print console.log session. All right, so with this thing, let us go to our UI and go to users page. Everything is fine, everything is working, and I am able to see the session being printed here as well. Now the testing point. Coming to out.js, instead of returning the session, I am going to return null. If I return null, I come back to my page.js, I can see the null is being returned now. So that means this error will be thrown with this message. So if I come to my UI, great, I am seeing no session info available. Where do we get this no session info available message from? This is what I am throwing as my error message. I am also seeing something. I am seeing this retry button, and I am also seeing this app page error, this text. Where is it coming from? So if I go to error.js file that I had created, you have seen app page error, and inside this error display where I am showing this error message along with this reset button. Awesome, isn't it? So this is what is proven. Now in the users level, we don't have any error page. Thus it is finding it one level above, which is like app. In the app level, I figured it out. There is an error.js file. It is showing that particular error.js file's content. That particular component is what is getting rendered. Now I am going to create one error.js file inside users itself. Here I am going to create a new file called error.js. Exactly the same content. Only thing I have changed is something called user page error. Okay. Now this user page error I have given here just to distinguish with the top level error.js where I was saying app page error. Now in this situation, if I go to the page, I see it has got changed to user page error. So it means that it is taking the error.js file from its closest proximity. You understood this one. This is really great thing that we have achieved so far. This is what we have learned. But now next big thing. Have you noticed that layouts are always outside of error boundary? And this is a very common mistake that developer makes because they feel that if there is an error happen, a runtime error happen inside this layout.js file under this particular route, it will be tackled and taken care by this error.js file, which is co-located to this layout.js file, but that's wrong. That's a common mistake that developers make. It is never going to be. If there is a runtime error occurs inside page.js file, that will be handled by error.js file. But if there is a runtime error happening inside layout.js file, that is never going to be handled by this error.js file. Why? Because if I look into this block, this green is mapped to this particular green. I am seeing this error.js file is creating this error boundary which is inside this green dotted line, but layout is always outside of this error boundary because in most of the cases layout will be having the static data. And irrespective of the error and all these things happening, you would like to manage the layout in a way that layout is always shown because most of the time it will have static data. But there could be conditions that some conditions you might want certain dynamic data, maybe a API call, getting a DB connections and all these things into your layout. So in that case also there are chances, there are opportunities that you will face runtime error. How do you handle that? The fact is pretty simple. I'll start from here. If there is an error happening to this layout is attached to this white dotted line. White dotted line is this error.js. This error.js file is under /user/id. So if there is an error happen in the layout of this won't be handled by this error.js. But this layout is under the error boundary of this particular error.js, right? You see this layout, the white's layout is under the boundary of this green dot's error boundary. So that means now if something happened over here, it will be handled by this particular error.js. Similarly, if something happened here, this will be handled by this error.js file. You got the point? So this is how for layout.js error handling happen. This is a common mistake that everybody makes. Let's see that in practice. Now again, to simulate a call, inside the leave, let's create another file called preference.js. layout.js. Inside preference, we can create an async function called get user preferences. Usually this kind of thing you might want to get in the layout, like what is the theme and all these things, just trying to simulate that. And I have commented error throwing so that I can simulate a runtime error as well. That says error getting user preferences, but I'm not doing anything right now. Now what I'll be doing inside this app users over here, I am going to create a layout. So new file layout.js, and the content of the layout is going to be almost similar to the other layout that we have seen. So I have created a user layout. It's almost similar, but only difference is I have now imported the get preferences method that just now I had created. And then I'm using this one over here as it is an async method. I made this as an async function, and using await I'm getting the preference. And there is the header that I have added, a navbar I have added, so that I can distinguish that it is running on a different layout than the root layout. Okay, so let's go and hit the slash users so that I know this layout is getting called. As I'm on the users page, you can see that navbar over here, some header, and then rest of the thing is correctly rendered like user list page and the Alexander. This one I have given so that if I go to other layout, I won't see this one. See, the header is not seen. In this case, the header is seen. That's the only difference. All right. Now over here, as I have a layout and I have user preferences call, let's throw an exception and see where exactly is get caught. Okay. So I'll go to preferences, and here I'll be throwing this exception, and I'm saying error getting user preferences. All right. So I'll go back to browser, and do you see where it is happening? It's happening on the app page error component. It's saying error getting user preferences. That's fine. Retry also there. Everything is fine. But the point here is it is going to the app page error component. What is app page error component? App page error component is this particular one, which is under the app. Whatever we have seen in that particular picture, that though there is a error.js file beside this particular layout, this error.js file called user page error, and there is an exception happen in this particular layout over here while fetching this particular user preferences. Now instead of using this error.js file which says user page error, it is going to one level up, which is this particular error.js file, which is of app page error. Why? Because of exactly this condition. Here layout got that error, so it cannot be tackled by this because this layout is always outside of this error boundary. So it will try to find out, do I have an error boundary on top of me? Yes, you have, which is at the app level. So it will be handled by that. Please remember that. I hope it is clear. Now it also brings another question. What about the topmost layout? In this case, the topmost layout, which is this one, you don't have any error boundary at the top at all. And no error boundary practically possible also, because outside app, if you do, it won't be considered in the purview of Next.js app router specific thing at all. So then if there is an exception happen, or if there is a runtime error happen in this topmost layout, what happened to that particular layout's error boundary? How exactly that is going to get handled? So that is where the next special thing come, which is called global error JS file. So in that case, what you can do if you have to handle such things, inside app, you can create a very special file is called global-error.js file. Again, it has to be a client component, and you can create a component like that. It also takes the error and reset. You can say very generic thing like something went wrong, or you can say error.message. You can print that also, and again an option to retry. So now if in the topmost layout, which is this one, if there is an exception or a runtime error happen, it will be handled by this global-error.js file. Again, there is a common mistake that people make. This global-error.js file doesn't have any impact in your development mode. It has impact only in the production mode. In the development mode, you will continue to see that error overlay that Next.js gives you, which comes as a pop-up where you see the stack trace and all. But in the production alone, you will be able to see this global-error.js things coming up for any kind of exception, runtime error inside the topmost at this particular layout.js. So I hope all these hierarchies, all this error boundary, everything that we have seen in this picture is now crystal clear to you. You will be able to spot and tell at any point of time If there is an error happening at any corner of your Next.js application, who is going to tackle it and how is going to tackle it? Do you need all this error.js file? You may not need. You may need only a top level error.js file and a global error.js file. Another good practice, if not common mistakes, if you want to tackle only at the top level using global-error.js file, you can do that. Even there is an error in the page, it will be handling that. But the good practice is always to have its own error.js file so that it can handle page level error. The global-error.js file we spoke just now, it only for the topmost layout error handling. That's how you can actually split thing up. We are almost towards the end of this video. I hope you are liking it, enjoying it. If so, please subscribe to the channel because I go really depth in terms of teaching you things, because I like to learn this way and I like to teach you this way. I hope you enjoy that, and if you do so, please subscribe and like this video. The last thing that I want to show is, like in the previous video, we have learned about server actions. How this error handling, error.js file, everything comes. What is the pattern for it, for the server actions? Let's see that quickly. Let's create an action. For that, under app, let's create a new folder called actions. And inside that, let's create a course action, maybe a course download action, course.js. You know that we have to use server. We have gone through all the different patterns of server actions in the previous video. I hope you have watched it. If not, please take a look. And here I'm going to create an async function, very simple one, which is like this. It says download course. It gets a form data. Form data means we'll submit a form from our client component and we will extract some information from this so that we can process it. Assume that when the form gets submitted, we get a course ID and we check if there is no course ID submitted, we throw an error. So this is a runtime error saying that please enter a course ID. And if course ID is there, rest of the code to download the course. And after the end of it, it returns a success. Also, if there are any kind of error exception happen, it catches it and rethrow it. Very simple course.js file. Now inside components, let's create one simple component called download course. Download hyphen course.jsx. Again, a simple React component. This download course we have imported inside that. It's a client component. And inside this component, I have a form. And then I have a submit button called download. Clicking on this button, the form will be submitted. Here, instead of on submit, let's start with action. On action, I am doing like download course. Okay. So form has an action attribute. This is what can call the server action. This is great. Now, if I going to use this download course, let's go to courses. Inside that, there is a page.js file. Let's import this guy, import download course. And below this H1, let us use download course. So this is going to give me a simple button, nothing more than that. So I'll go to courses. I can see this download. Now let me click on download. The moment I click on download, what I see, the form gets submitted. I have not passed any course ID. So as per our server action logic, if there is no course ID passed, I'm throwing an exception. With that exception, I'm getting like, please enter a course ID, and I'm seeing this. And if you have also noticed that I'm getting this error component from the app page error because courses doesn't have its specific error.js file. So this is one way a error can be handled from your server action. But wait, instead of doing this, won't it be good if I can catch this error and show this particular error output somewhere near to the form itself? Because you don't want your user to go here in a separate page and then wonder about how can I get this particular form back so that I can retry this download. Of course, retrying this, it is going to make the form action back over here, and again you can click on it. It's like a back and forth user experience, which is not that great. So instead of that, I can change this guy a little bit. We have learned that apart from actions, we can also call things on submit. So in on submit, let's call a method called download. The download can be a very simple asynchronous function where I can get an event. I'm doing e.prevent default so that the form doesn't get submitted, which was happening in the last time with actions. And here I'm having a try catch and I'm doing like download codes, the same thing. In this case, I'm passing a hard-coded ID, a different way of passing data. I could pass the form data as well. Getting a response, if there is an error happen, the error will come here. Now, as I'm passing the course ID over here, not as a form data, I'll just change this one to course ID and I don't need this form data at all. Okay. So this is how my logic is at this point of time. With this logic, let me try running this. So I'm clicking on download. I'm not seeing any error, but nothing happening either. For that to happen, I can show some success message maybe. So I'm taking a use state, and let me quickly create two states. One is called success message and error message. Let me show them inside the form just above the button. If there is a success, then show a success message, show it in green. If there is an error, red, show it in red, basically the error message. So once I get the response, I can actually put the success message, and if I get an error, I can put the error message. But for that, I cannot keep this outside. I have to bring this guy inside my component, and here I can put set success message, a normal React. Here I can put set error message. So now if I submit, you see download, I get a success because I have passed this particular course ID, and that course ID came here, and this particular condition didn't satisfied. I'm returning success. I'm getting that success. Now if I don't pass it, so I don't pass anything, no course ID. So now it will throw an error. Let's do download. You see, please enter course ID, and the error is also getting logged over here. So this is one other way you can handle the error with your server action in the form, where you really don't want to go away or out of the component where the form is, because you want to give the feedback or the user experience to your end users there itself so that they can correct and do stuff. So I hope all this that we have seen so far makes a lot of sense to you, right? Similarly, if you have to throw something from your middleware, you can also do that. It will also fall back to the respective error.js easily. We spoke about server actions and middleware a lot. I have created two crash courses for server actions and middleware. You can see that on your screen. Please try them out, learn more, and I hope that you enjoy doing stuff with Next.js. In the upcoming video, I'm going to touch base a little bit on the not found factor of it. Just like error.js, we have seen, like, though it is very easy, but there are a lot of edge cases, nitty-gritty that you have to keep in mind to work on the production level application. Similarly, for the not found also on the similar line, but that will be much more shorter video. And after that, we are going to get into understanding the caching part of it. Stay tuned, subscribe to tapaScript so that you don't miss out. And if you enjoyed this video, please post a like and comment. Thank you. Take care. Keep learning. Keep sharing.